Hello, welcome to episode 2 of State of the Auction. Today we got Tom Dennis and Josh Smith as a special guest here today. He runs and owns, operates Forks Mobile Wash. Yeah, and we'll start off with a little introduction. If you just want to introduce yourself a little, please.
Hi, I'm Josh Smith. I own and operate Forks Mobile Wash. We got started in the washing company or business about 18 years ago. And Dennis approached me and asked if I would be interested in running the cleaning portions of the auctions, probably about 13 years ago.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I just want to share a little bit about your journey with Resource Auction, I guess. Maybe some memorable stories.
Oh, there's been quite a few of memorable events that we've done.
Don't water them down.
No, everything from work.
And don't give it all away either.
Everything from working in a bunch of mud to battling snowstorms, I guess, at big Alerus sales when we have to go rent air compressors just to blow the snow off.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I remember the picture people coming right behind me, and I got a big air compressor just blowing it off fast enough for them to snap a couple pictures for the online sale, and that was about as quick as we could move because it was still coming down.
Yeah, dirt's not always our enemy. I remember that real plainly when Josh was washing equipment one day. The next day he was blowing snow off of it so we could get pictures, and it's all in a day's work. It's all part of the prep, so he was ready, willing, and able to do it. And everything takes a different light when necessity is the mother of invention.
I think there's a couple times it almost happened in the same day. Went from washing to snowing to sunshine again. So,
Yeah. I guess one question I was kind of curious, how important do you think it is, this the cleaning and everything, the orderliness of everything for online auctions specifically, I guess, if that makes sense? Dennis, Tom?
Well, I think, a lot of people have taken a different approach to setting up auctions over the years. The old school way of setting up auctions, which was something I was never interested in doing, even at the time that we started doing all this, basically people would take things out of its environment, out of the shed that it was in, out of the bush where it was parked, wherever it was, and just put it right there and unhook it. And the auctioneer would come along and drive from that side of the yard to this side of the yard. Tom remembers this very well. Yep. Over to there. Okay, everybody, come on over here now. We're going to sell the cultivator. It's over there, and it has a flat tire, so we didn't move it any further because we didn't want to wreck the rim. Those were all things that when I started doing this, I decided we weren't going to do. If we couldn't put our best foot forward and make everything look the best that it possibly could and get it in a nice, orderly fashion where we could drive around in a circle or a square or two squares, whatever it might be, and sell it, it just didn't make any sense to me. And that was one of the benefits of being a first-generation auctioneer. I had to learn everything that needed to be done myself with the crew that I had, and was fortunate to always have good people with me. These two have been with me for a long time doing what we've been doing. Prior to them, God rest their souls, I've got many, many old people that set up auctions and worked auctions with us from the beginning, coming up on 40 years now, that are long gone. And we just established a lot of things that people weren't doing, and we got a lot of compliments for it. And compliments were great, but we got a lot of work because of it. People would come to us and say, Dennis, I really liked what you did here. Gosh, you walked and drove down the line of equipment and sold it. There wasn't two tractors here and a truck over there, and then we sold a hay rack full of cultivator shovels over here and some twine balls here. It was all orderly, nice, decent, sometimes cataloged. Nowadays always is because it's online. Mm-hmm. And of course, cleaning that stuff up was always a big part of that too, making it look good. How many times a person can say it doesn't matter if you're going to the dance or you're going to have an auction or if you're trading your car in at the dealership, first impression is best.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't stress it again. It's nothing better than seeing a nice clean piece of equipment and opening up the cab door on a tractor and going, hey, this is pretty nice. I want to jump in here and operate this.
Oh, I think cleanliness sells. I mean, you know, if you climb into something and it's, you know, pristine in the cab and smells good and looks sharp, I mean, I think that's a big thing of the whole sale.
Yeah, it definitely has proven itself over the amount of time I've seen it, and yeah, it's a good tip for anybody looking to sell or do something too. It's just, you know, get it as clean as you can, and you know, you're just making the best of what you got. You don't need to go through and overhaul the piece or repaint it or anything like that. Just make it look what, you know, as good as you can and what it is.
Well, I mean, I think even if the paint's good, you know, if you buff something, it, you know, if it's shiny,
Very
you know,
important.
it catches the eyes of people. They're gonna take a second look if it's shining, you know, as compared to being dull or faded even.
Yeah, you should kind of talk about what you have for products and how you do things too, because sometimes, you know, farmers are, you know, I farmed and I'd wax stuff, but it just doesn't have that shine in what you can do with stuff.
Well, I mean, you know, we take everything from somebody who's taken very well care of their equipment to stuff that's right out of the field. I mean, just kind of depends on what steps you're going to take based off the condition of the equipment. If something's right out of the field, I mean, we're going to wash it. We're going to, you know, soap it down, and we're not just washing it to put it away either. We're washing it, you know, for people to see it. I mean, we're giving it a very thorough wash and then going over the top of it and, you know, buffing it out if it needs to be, or going through the cab, vacuuming things, wiping them down, you know, giving them a little shine left back in it, just trying to take what's there and make it look a little better for the
Yeah,
seller.
it's the little things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just everything that, you know, might seem very minor to somebody else, you know, sometimes gets overlooked. And that's the part where we try to come in and, you know, not overlook the cleanliness or just getting the best out of, you know, what we are given from the customer.
Yeah, I don't know how many times it's happened that you came through and cleaned up stuff and the farmer goes, I don't know if I want to sell that tractor. It looks really good yet, you know? And it's like, oh yeah, it was always there and you had it. You just kind of, you were looking, you know, forward to moving on to bigger and better things, but your piece of equipment was very good.
Well, everybody's got a certain amount of time, and when they're doing something and they're busy, they're putting their crop in, they're taking the crop off, all of that. Sometimes the cab kit and the seat isn't the most important thing. Making sure that the machine is doing its job is number one. And then, of course, you know, we come along and get ready to sell this equipment, and that's one of the things that we're always priding ourselves in, is that we take the extra mile to tell guys, let's put a cab kit in here, let's put a seat in here, let's get the rear tires to match, let's do some of the things that need to be done, but this tractor really should be buffed. And one of the things we always hear is, it's never been done before, I don't know if it'll come out. Well, that's the tractor to buff, because the paint's never been buffed, and there's a lot of good paint underneath there. And that's what Tom said. Then you get all done with that new cab kit, buffing, you know, taking care of everything, making it look nice. It's like, boy, why am I selling this? This is great.
But I think some farmers run into, you know, they'll tell you, I wax my equipment. Well, waxing's one thing, but when you're buffing it, you're going far more than just putting a coat of wax on it and wiping it off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're buffing it, I mean, you're removing the oxidization, you're bringing the actual shine back, not just a little coat of protective wax put on by hand. I mean, those two are totally different, and I think that's educating the farmer, you know, to tell them, you know, it's not the same as just putting wax on it. We're actually restoring your paint to original, you know, removing stuff.
Well, one of the other things that's interesting is, and everybody's good at this. Tom's a farmer, I'm a farmer. You know, we all wash our equipment as good as we need to put it away in the shed. And probably if he and I didn't have the relationship that we have with the auction business, we maybe wouldn't understand that and Josh has learned this over the years too, putting that equipment away in the shed when you're done with it versus getting it ready to sell is two different things. You know, washing it off and taking care of it and maintaining it versus spiffing it up and getting it ready for 1,000 people to see, that's two different stories. And that's what all of us have always prided ourselves in. You know, Tom was a big part of the setup crew, along with John and Shane and Jake and different other people over the years. Lots of guys that have gone out and set up these auctions, and Josh has become part of the family in terms of that. You know, they travel together and work together to put these things together and do this stuff, and they know what everybody is thinking. These guys come to a yard, everybody knows what everybody else is thinking. There's always one guy in the group that makes the decision as to how we're going to park everything. Another guy goes around, figures out how we're going to get everything cleaned up and what repairs need to be made to the thing. And then someone deals with the seller to convince them of the things that we're doing. Because the most famous question that you'll ever get, or not the question, I would say the direction that we've always gotten in the 40 years that we've done this, the number of years that Tom's done it, the number of years that Josh has done it, is when we book the auction, we always get the same answer. I need an order of how you want this stuff parked because I'm going to get it all parked. Well, that's one of the toughest things we ever have to do with that seller, is to say, you know what, as much as you would like to be able to do that, it isn't going to happen, because there's a specific order, a specific way, and a time and a place for everything, and a way that we want it done. And in the wintertime, if you park things, chances are you'll have to move it to move snow. In the summertime, you're always going to have to cut grass. And that is the one thing that the Lord blessed me with in terms of that portion of the business. I am a last-minute person, and I can honestly say that those are last-minute details. So that falls in well with what I've had to deal with my own timeline over the years. But what are you guys laughing at? That's not funny.
I don't know. I think it is.
Anyways, but you know, it is. There's a time and a place for everything, and now we have so many places we go, and so many times we see things, and I'm not ever going to step on any competitors' toes, but you know, a lot of the mindset now as well, it's an online auction. You know, these 1,000 people aren't going to come to my yard and see this stuff. So it doesn't need to be clean, and it doesn't need to be lined up. Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice if it were? If the guys that are coming, still probably 400 to 500 of them coming to inspect, drove in the yard and knew you were having an auction, and could tell the minute that they drove in, because everything was lined up just like we were going to do it for a live auction. Big benefits for sellers. And, you know, taking that extra charge and that extra mile, and Tom will, you know, and Josh will both vouch for this. Sometimes, you know, you're dealing with people that have a lot of emotions. You know, you're dealing with people whose whole livelihood is there in front of them. And one thing about our clientele, whether they're farmers or contractors, they do have, most of them, I'd say 90% of them, have a pretty good love affair with their equipment. They bought it. They paid hard-earned money for it. They worked hard to get what they've got. They started with something of a much lesser quality and have worked their way up to this. So number one, it's hard for them to part with that. Tom's a farmer, I'm a farmer, we love our toys. And you know what? We have a respect for equipment, we have a love for equipment, and you know, sometimes the more of it we have, the better we feel, but it's a security blanket in a lot of ways. And when you come to someone that's getting ready to retire, sell off their equipment, or if there's been a death in the family, that changing of the guard in terms of that machinery leaving the yard can be a huge adjustment.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of the auction process, dealing with the family or the retirees. And there's a series of emotions that people go through, and it's all very normal. You know, because it's their whole life, and they're picking a day that everything's going to leave their yard. So, yeah, and a lot of pride, and all very good things. But it's all part of the process. And working with our customers and sellers, you gain their respect, and they see into what you're.
They see what you're doing,
and they appreciate that.
That's
they know that we're not there just line it up and go. You know, we care.
Tom and Shane and John and that crew, and Tom and Shane in particular, for many years lined up these auctions, and it would always kind of start the same way. How's it going? well, they don't want to move this over here, they don't want to do that, but we'll give it some time and see how it goes. And by the time you guys left, they were singing praises, and I was getting phone calls. Boy, those guys worked hard. They got everything put together for us. Josh made my tractor look like new again. And those are the things that you like to hear, because then everybody's on board. Everybody knows that you're doing your best, we're doing our best, and they're, we've taken the first step to having the best possible auction we can, make everything look as good as we can, have it in a nice orderly lineup, and lay out the work orders for the equipment, lay out the spare parts for the equipment, do everything you can to make it easy for the seller and easy for the buyer.
I think it also helps when they see the end product, though. When they go down the line and they see you look right down, the front of every truck and trailer, and they're all pulled out to the exact same spot. I think, that's huge for the customer. They see the end result, and they see all the hard work that was put into it, and no attention to detail was skipped anywhere along the line. I think that's huge.
A long time ago, I was probably 18 years old when I had first started this business, and that was one of the things that we really prided ourselves in and used to get ourselves into the business, because our competitors weren't doing it at the time, and that was equipment cleaning. Well, when you're 18 to 20 years old, you've got a lot of 18 to 20-year-old friends that have time to go out and work with you and get equipment cleaned up. And we were young enough to do it, and we could work all hours of the night and get that done. So I would go with them. I was part of the cleanup crew. I was the auctioneer, so I got to see everything firsthand, and I was always around for that. And I had a guy tell me one day, he said, "Dennis, I really don't think that cultivator's worth washing." And I said, "How would we ever know?" He said, "Well, can't you take one look at it and tell for yourself?" And he was a nice elderly gentleman and a very good friend of mine, indeed, probably a sure-tail relative. And he said, "I don't think you need to wash the bottom side of the hydraulic cylinder on that old cultivator. It's only going to bring $200 no matter what you do." And I said, "Well, we're going to do it anyways, because I always go the extra mile, and I want to make sure that it's done right." And I said, "Let's ask the guy who buys it after the auction, just out of curiosity, why he bought the cultivator." So we sold the cultivator, brought pretty good money, actually, far more than either he or I had anticipated. And we walked over, and the guy was standing there hooking it up to his pickup. And the old feller said to him, he said, "Why'd you buy that cultivator?" He said, "I never seen one that clean in my life." He put his hand on my shoulder. He says, "Do what you're doing, boy. Just keep doing it." And we just kept doing it. And, as the business is growing, sometimes it's not been as easy to pay that close of attention to detail. I mean, once upon a time, we were moving from yard to next and doing these auctions. And sometimes you're fighting, Josh and Tom and I talked about this before we started the broadcast, some of this stuff is really difficult because you got limited amounts of time, Josh. Some days you work on the sunshine. You
Sun up to sun down some days.
But you work with the sunshine, because sometimes it's 22 degrees out and the only heat you've got is the sunshine.
That's a very good point there too. A lot of times you got to melt the ice to even see the piece of equipment.
So probably easy enough to talk about TV programs, but I don't want to mention in particular a program because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But if you went and watched one of the shows where they're doing gold mining, for example, and they're always dealing with the ice in the machines, and there's always the diesel engines running, the generators are running, the pumps are going, the pumps are freezing, there's ice in the trommels and everything else. And I'm watching that show, and I think, you know what, that's a lot of work and in a difficult place. And we don't experience anything to that degree, but we certainly have days when everything's been frozen.
I do recall going to one sale. You wanted me to wash a combine so you could get pictures for the advertising, and I froze up a washer on the way.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And I had to borrow the farmer's washer just to get you to be able to take the picture, and 2.5 hours back on my way home and stopped for a repair in Fargo.
And then, there are times, and I mean, I don't think this is talking out of school. I mean, it would seem to make sense to people because everything you do has to be sensible. And one of the first processes that we take when we book an auction is to do the advertising photos. We call them the money shots. So when we do the advertising photos versus the online auction photos, we'll take one money shot of each piece of equipment. And Josh will sometimes call me and say, "Which side do you want?"
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because we can get one side done because we got so many hours of sunlight, so much time to get it done. And so which side do you want? And, you know, I always say, use your own judgment. You've been doing this long enough. And, you know, from time to time now, he'll even send the picture and say, is this okay? I said, it's so good, I don't even have to come there and take the picture. So there you go. Everybody's learned a lot. But then when we get down to taking all of those pictures, whether it's a live simulcast auction or whether it's an online in-place auction, you know, major pieces of equipment, 40, 60, 100 pictures, nothing out of the ordinary. Everything has to be clean then because everything's going to show up in those pictures. And, you know, and of course, everything has corners and shafts and pulleys. And I mean, they're, you know, if you could tell me that you could get a used combine 100% clean, I'd say you're a magician.
Yeah.
Because when you wash this spot and move to that one, you wash back to this one, you wash back to that one, and it goes on all day long with all that chaff and small dust. But Josh does a pretty good job of getting the combines cleaned up. And the other thing with that is, I think a lot of guys, when they'll look at a combine and see that the outside shell's been washed, combine's been washed pretty much, yeah, there might be a little bit of fuzz behind this bearing or whatnot. They don't care about that because they don't want a bunch of water pushed through that combine anyways. So there's a time and a place for that, and a kind of an amount of common sense that you use when you're dealing with that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think that's why Josh ends up washing some of those combines 2 and 3 times. It's just that you don't want to blow on the bearings, and you don't want to do the wrong things. You take your time, but as you do that, it goes back and forth. And you know, Josh can probably talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're washing a combine, you're definitely going around it 3-4 times. You know, there's not a doubt in my mind. It also helps so that, you know, as a team, you know, you and Shane and I, when we were going all the time, you know, it helps to have more sets of eyes than just your one on a piece of equipment, because there's always something you miss, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And yes, it happens now and then, but you do a good job, though.
No, but I mean, there's plenty of times where I, you know, just say, hey, you want to take a look at this? What do you think? You know, I mean, every piece of equipment's different, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end of the day, we just want to get it right and do the best we can, and so it well represents itself.
Absolutely.
So,
I think.
So we used to sell cattle by auction. Of course, some people still do. This company hasn't done it for a while, but we try not to sell animals by auction. But do you ever encounter any when you're doing your cleaning for an auction?
Oh, a few. I remember somebody brought a piece. I believe it was a seed tender they brought in the Alerus at one time, and there was a family of raccoons in it.
Oh, jeez.
That's correct. And we were right here in town and had a family of raccoons inside of a seed tender. And
Then trying to figure out how to get them out with somebody getting bit, or
fortunately enough, that was long enough ago that I don't remember what happened.
no, I think they all relocated themselves and they're all fine.
I think so.
I believe so.
They're probably living along the freeway now, working for food.
it was just kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, there's. I remember a couple of other occasions where you opened up some trucks and had some eyes staring at you, and lots of little eyes. And you know, over the years, we've found products and different things that we deal with, and Tom has been real helpful with that, finding things that you put in vehicles to get rid of some odors. You know, sometimes it's smoking, sometimes it's mice, sometimes it's just a window got left down and there's some mildew in the vehicle or whatever it is. And anything that we can do to make those things disappear, we help the seller to do it. We want them to have their best possible auction experience that they can have, and whatever we can do to make it that way, we'll take that extra mile to do it. Interesting story was a little while ago, we were talking about one of the most interesting times we ever had an auction, and I think it was in the spring of 2018 or 2019, probably 2018 is when it was, now that I think about it. But we had 3 different yards that we got caught in between the spring thaw and the auction date and had things partially lined up, and the yards let go. And Tom and his crew had to go in and physically, literally scrape all of the mud out of the seller's yard and pile it up in the field next to their yard, and we parked the equipment on the frost, let everybody get it out of there, and then had to move all that dirt back into the yard and level it out. And that got to be a common occurrence. And that spring, we did that about 2 or 3 times. And it got easier every time we did it. The first time you did it all with a box blade behind one of our tractors. The second time we comboed with a guy that had a motor grader. And the third time we just let the guy with the motor grader do it.
Yes.
Yep. And, you know, those are things that if we hadn't done that, all that machinery would be sitting up to its hubs in mud, and everyone coming to the auction would be walking up to their knees in mud. And, you know, every one of those cases, those were 7-digit auctions.
Yeah, and then fantastic results on those sales too.
Yeah,
They went
and
very well.
I just, you know, I want to say hats off to you guys for taking the initiative and the effort and having the amount of care that you've had in dealing with those people. Because the bottom line is, these people have entrusted their livelihoods to us. They have the faith in us to do this and to do a good job for them. And they are handing us the keys, literally, and saying, you know what, you do this, you do your best, you do everything you can for me. And then in the end, we do it all and we come back to them and we have the results that we have. It's phenomenal and they're happy. But when I look at the people that I've had to deal with over the years in terms of staff and crew and whatnot, it's made my life pretty easy. I really have to say that. And I want to thank you guys and all of your cohorts that are listening. I mean, I've had people that have been with us for a long, long time that have busted their butt, not just for me, but for those sellers too. And those sellers always echo that. That's the thing that I have appreciated most over the years. I don't think I've ever had a situation where all of you guys have gone out to put together an auction and somebody hasn't said, wow, those guys really did a good job for me. So hats off to you for that, and hats off to them for giving us the opportunity first and foremost.
You know, I think sometimes you run into the seller down the road, and, you know, they're always there and appreciative and make sure to go out of their way and tell you thank you for the work you did. And, I mean, that's happened to me more times than I can even count on one hand. You run into that seller, and they're like, you know, I can't believe you ever shined up that tractor like that. I didn't even think it was that good when I first bought it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. A lot of great people out there, and very appreciative. And thank you, Dennis, for your comments too. And I've had to meet some of the people that worked with the company before, and fantastic people. And it's always a pleasure, sharing stories with those guys too.
It's kind of funny how it goes around, you know, because Kyle, my employee that's been with me 7 years doing this now, you know, was it his uncle that worked for you?
His uncle was my setup foreman and yard foreman for many years. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of full circle there, isn't it?
It is, actually. I was thinking about that the other day, you know, for all the years that his uncle worked for me, and he moved on to something different, and, you know, and still great friends. We get along wonderfully. Saw him at a family wedding here a couple weeks ago, and the interesting thing was I never knew that was his nephew. No one had ever told me that. So then they're standing there talking, and I'm like, oh, for Pete's sake, you guys are related. And I said, so you're sharing war stories about washing equipment? No, we're just talking about you. So, but yeah, no, and I mean, you know, we've had just so many good people that have helped us with that over the years, and like you said, so many people that echo back when the seller says, gosh, and one of the interesting things is, you know, you'll go to someone's place and you'll walk around and say, you know, this needs a new seat cover, or needs a seat reupholstered. You know, the rims should really be sandblasted and painted on this truck. You should replace a couple of tires. And whoa. I'm getting rid of this stuff. I'm done. I don't want to see this anymore. I'm like, yeah. But here's the thing. If I think that we can do this and spend $20,000 and get you $200,000 back, would you be interested? Well, yeah. Okay. Then if you trust me, let me do it. Yeah. And once you do that for a handful of people, they'll tell their friends and neighbors when the clock rolls around to their turn, just let them go ahead and do what they want. You'll be happy that you did in the end.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's paid huge benefits over the years.
No, you've taught me that one of the first years I worked for you. And now it's easy to go to people, and it's all about return on investment. We're not here to spend your money. We're here to make you money. And it works every time. You know, it's like we need some seat covers, like Dennis was saying. Let's put a cab kit, or let's put some new seats in this. Actually, you talked about rims. We had a gentleman that we did, and Josh remember this too. East of Warren, there, a guy, and he had a nice Volvo truck and a Timty trailer, and it was all very nice and straight. Great farm, good farmer, but the rims were a little rusty. I said, "Hey, you got to put." I don't want to do it. I don't want to put new rims on. I don't think it's worth it. I'm not going to bring it. I said, "You got to do it." I said, "Just trust me." Trust me. He did it. Results were phenomenal. Actually, he gives us referrals all the time. Met with some people yesterday that he had visited with, and I'm going to call and thank him for that too, because he's done it a few times for us, and he just still can't believe how spending a few dollars just made him a bunch more.
It's kind of fun when someone calls and says, "Hey, I want you to do my auction." You might not remember me, and sometimes now lately with the gray hair, sometimes I have to think about it. But over the years, I'd say, "Oh no, you're so and so's friend." Yeah, that's right. Well, you know what? He told me how happy he was, and you know what? We just need you to come and take a look at this. And when you're still getting referrals 20 years down the line, that means we all know that we did the right thing, and we're doing the right thing, and we're continuing to do the right thing. Everything changes, everything evolves, but good service doesn't have to change. Good service can always be just that. Do your best for someone that entrusted their lifeline with you, and it will pay them benefits and you benefits down the line. Yeah. No question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I want to talk a little bit about that lineup thing again, because, it wasn't so long ago I went to a competitive auction somewhere, and it was still cultivator here, tractor there, truck over here, just the way they came out of the shed. And watching them traipse across that yard all day long at a live auction. Well, we're going to go over here now, then we're going to go over there, then we're going to come back here. And that's one thing we've always prided ourselves in. Keep the line going so that the auction goes smoothly, so that the crowd is following you, because every time you give them a chance to stop and go to the lunch counter, they will. And if you can just keep everything going in a steady motion, and, product knowledge is another thing that's huge, knowing what you're selling, and saying, that's a Crisafulli pump, a 10-inch pump on a trailer with a 540 PTO, instead of having no clue what it is whatsoever and saying that red thing there. That instills confidence in your buyers like you wouldn't believe.
It happened yesterday. They go, we had another gentleman was out and looked at stuff. Yeah, he said that was a service truck. Okay. He said, Shane and I were out there, and he goes, "You guys made a lot of notes on that piece of equipment there in that truck." I said, "Yeah, it's all very important. There was a crane on it, there's a compressor, and that's the kind of things that people are looking. You have to show and tell what each piece of equipment has, and accurately as you can,
Yeah.
And the buyers appreciate that. And like anything, too, we line it up for a reason and get it cleaned up for a reason. We do the best we can with pictures and specs, but we still encourage everybody to please come out and look at the items too, and and judge it for yourself at the end. You've seen it, and it spiked your interest, and now you're just going to spend some money and come and look at it. You bet.
See, you and I are old enough to say that and understand what that means. These two are probably too young. Show and tell was how we grew up. That was the fifth thing you learned on the fourth day of school. Bring something in and talk about it. It's show and tell.
Yep.
I still remember that. It was every Friday when I was growing up. I'm getting up there in age too, Dennis.
Well, yeah, I guess if I'm 40 years older than I was when I started, you're probably 20 now, so 20 years older.
I am 20 years older than when I started almost.
If it makes you feel any better, we did still have show and tell in my time.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you brought in your iPad.
Well, yeah.
Tom and I brought in, Lord knows what.
Chicken eggs.
Yeah, chicken. And then had to explain which came first.
Yeah.
And we're still talking about it.
We're still arguing about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, touching on, you're talking about knowing the items, being able to point out specific pieces on a piece of equipment. That's a really good tip for a buyer as well. if you know what you're getting into, it's a lot easier to spend that extra dollar. And
Confidence. You know, buying with confidence is a huge thing, and watched it for years. You know, if people are confident in what they're buying, they'll step up, they'll pay. You know, good used equipment is never in surplus. There might be an odd thing, you know, say, you know, throughout the course of a change in events like we've had the last few years, everything was short for a long time. Now maybe there's a few too many combines, but there's only so many of a certain kind of anything. You know, there's only so many of these machines with so many hours on them, and they typically come from farm retirement auctions and places like that. So there never is a surplus of good used equipment, especially coming out of retirement scenarios. And I don't think that'll ever change. I think it'll probably only get worse because you know, there's not that many yard lights anymore.
But I think going back to your whole situation on good used equipment, I don't think any two tractors, they can have the same number on it, you know, on the side of the tractor, but that doesn't mean that that tractor is the same as the, you know, the first one or the next one down the line.
Equipment and land are like snowflakes. There are no two pieces that are alike. And I don't know any other way to put it. You know what? Yeah, there's similarities, but everything's a one-off. It definitely is. I mean, you know, and you can tell by looking at it just exactly what you're looking at. And that goes back to the original machine being made the best that it can be. You know, paint is not an answer for everything. Paint sometimes looks like you're trying to cover things up. And we really always caution sellers about paint. You know, clean it up as good as you can. And, you know, outside of our world, you get away from the farm machinery world, you get away from construction equipment. Just look at what's going on in the collector car industry right now. Used to be about collector cars being refurbished and being all put back together. Now it's all about the patina.
Yep.
And it's original state, barn find. And a lot of the stuff that we sell for people is in original state. We just wash it, clean it up, put it back out there, and make it look as good as we can. So
Yeah, and that's true with patina too. You know, they'll redo the seats. You know, they'll do the weather stripping on the doors, but they leave the rest of it as it lays, and it's kind of cool thing.
But I mean, if it has a scratch, it has a scratch. I mean, you know, people know they're buying used as long as the rest of the paint's there. If you can make that shine, they know it's all original.
Yeah, there isn't too many new pieces of equipment out there without a scratch in it.
no,
You know.
no, not too many auctioneers or auction company managers or equipment cleaners or auction interns that don't have a scratch either. All hard fought for. So just like that tractor with the scratch, it paid for it one day.
Just like everybody, a couple battle scars defines you as to what you are.
Yep.
Specialty equipment, Reed, that's one thing that, you know, we always bounce around a little bit. You know, in our area, there's a lot of potato equipment, a lot of sugar beet equipment, a lot of edible bean equipment. That's stuff that's not common to a lot of areas, and you don't have to drive very far out of this area, and it becomes uncommon. But the Red River Valley is loaded with sugar beet and potato equipment, edible bean equipment, things like that. And that's where product knowledge comes in, and that's where I think, you know, instilling that in the buyer, letting them know that you know what you're selling and that they know that you have a knowledge of what it is that you're moving, that helps them a lot too. I think that anything that you can do to put a good word out there about that equipment, you know, knowing about potato apron, knowing what the different spacings of potato apron mean. And, you know, whether you're an online auctioneer or whether you're doing it live, you still have the ability to tell the tale of that piece of equipment. And if you detail all that stuff out and take good pictures of it, you're telling the tale. If you're standing in front of it selling it live, you're telling the tale. And building confidence in buyers is huge.
Yeah, that's for sure. And Dennis is an expert on potato equipment, and GPS equipment is another thing. Or auto
That
steering
I'm
equipment.
not an expert on.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody is. I
It
think
changes quite fast.
it's a real fastly changing tool on the farm, but it's a very important part of the farm now.
It used to be, Tom, that we had to have young people around to help us lift things. Now we have to have young people around to explain IT things.
Yeah, that's
what you got me for, huh?
Well, I wasn't going to single you out, but you know what? Step up.
It's fact, and yeah.
I think if you have the confidence to talk to the seller and you're confident in what you're talking about, I'm very fortunate with the people I have work for me. They're very educated. They've worked on a farm as well before. But just knowing what a piece of equipment's called, or, how to even move that piece of equipment or whatever, just showing confidence in what you're talking about and what you're doing is huge. If you're confident, the seller's confident in you.
It is, and there's nothing better, because going out to a farmyard and seeing a piece of equipment and from way back, and I'll call it back in the day, but like an old 4010 or an M International, and just having those visits with farmers, and then getting confidence, and they'll maybe want to run their tractor around the yard because and that can be fine too, and then they'll see that we can jump in it and run it and operate it and know how to do it, and they like that too. So we're not gonna. They're kind of fussy. They're nervous we're gonna maybe hurt something or do or put a scratch in it,
or just not know.
Yeah, but we do, and we get along fine, and we can operate all that stuff and do that, and know how to start it and know how to operate it. Some of that stuff is not the easiest to get to move.
One of my fond memories of this whole situation is back when we started, one of Dennis's favorite things to do was right before the auction, he'd be the one out there with the old tractor on the farm, the old open station tractor, and he's pulling the harrow or the box blade around, leveling off the road of where the auction truck was going to drive, and Dennis was just in his heyday, smiling up a storm.
Oh, he had to have the perfect yellow brick road right through the auction.
Yeah, but you just put him on that old tractor, and he was just happy as a clam.
Well, there's two reasons for that. Tom nailed one is, I always wanted to make sure the yard looked great and it was nice in front where everybody was going to walk and we had a good place to drive. And it was a pretty good calming effect too, right before the auction sometimes. And I was never overly stressed out because I was always confident in what I was doing, but it sure gave a guy a chance to unwind, and of course, if you noticed it, a few other people had to notice it too. So it was a good chance to get noticed. And then somebody would leave there saying, geez, that guy actually does know how to do something.
Yeah, every true farmer honestly likes to get away and just jump in a tractor sometimes and just go for a ride because it is relaxing.
So as the second part of that, did it bring you back to your childhood?
No, my childhood was mostly spent on the end of a pitchfork, so that's why I ran for the tractor. I didn't want to have to get back to the pitchfork. I told a guy that the other day. He said, well, here's a funny story as long as you're on that. My dad was still alive. Little did I know he wouldn't live too many years after that. I was still a pretty young man when he passed away, but the gentleman that I started doing auctions with when I was a senior in high school, my dad and I were working in the barn one night, and he came to the barn and he said, Gordon, he said, I'm going to bring Dennis with me and we're going to start doing some auctions. And at the time, they were a fairly large company, no longer in existence. And he said, Dennis is going to work with us. And, my dad said, well, that's great. I've always wanted him to be an auctioneer. I thought about doing it myself, but he said, I think he's going to be able to make this work. There's a lot of things that we discuss and talk about auctions or whatnot. But he said, he's a pretty young guy. I'm not quite, sure that he's ready for all this. And the guy looked around the barn and he said, well, he said, if his choices are to stay here and do this or come with me, he said, I think I'm going to win out. And that was why I say I would always run from the pitchfork and go to the tractor. And that was another case where, we just started. And I really was. I was a senior in high school when I started doing this. And talk about interesting times. So we talked about that in the last podcast. But Josh brought up something. I got to get to this. I got to talk about this because we talk about people and their items and the things that we need to know about people's stuff when they bring it to us. In the heyday of one of our Alerus Center auctions in the middle of winter, the one in particular where Josh had to blow all the snow off of the equipment so that we could get decent photos of it, we had probably, Tom will remember this when I start talking about it, we probably had 30 or 40 trucks that were there, and we got 40 inches of snow, and it got really cold. Very seldom where we live do we get a whole bunch of snow once it turns really cold, but it all came at the same time. It was about 20 below. We had 40 inches of snow, and we had all these trucks sitting in a line and had to move them, and we started down the road of trying to get a big forced air furnace underneath them and, you know, get all the hot air under them and get them started and everything, which would be the great thing to do. But we seen real soon that we were going to run out of time. So I went down the street and I found a guy with a tow truck and I said, come in and back all the air off all these trucks and start pull starting them. And then what? And I said, then leave them run. Then little by little, the combines and the tractors came in, and we had a fuel truck there. One of the local fuel vendors was there, and we put number one fuel in everything. Put 1,500 gallons of number one fuel in all these units. When we did a total head count, we had 160 some diesel units that were sitting on that lot running for 3 days. And a guy came in and he said, why do you have all these machines running? And I said, well, if we don't have them running when you come to look at them, you're not going to want to pay big money for them. They're all sitting here running. We've got them all started. They've all got fuel in them. They've all got conditioner in them. We're going to leave them sitting here running. He said, wow, that's quite a deal. And I said, yeah. I said, let me tell you something, partner. You ain't lived until you started 165 of somebody else's diesel engines when it's 40 below zero. Because every one of them's got a trick or a trag or a something or this or that or the next thing. And all that stuff with these guys and all of us working on that, all sitting there running. And I'll never forget it. We had one wheel loader that nobody could start. And I don't know if you're going to remember this or not. Tried and tried and tried to get a hold of the guy. And, you know, finally got a hold of him the night before the auction. And I said, hey, he was in Mexico. It was winter. He had brought his loader to the auction, dropped it off. He called me. He said, you've been trying to get a hold of me. He said, I haven't been able to get back in touch with you. He said, I'm on vacation. He said, what's the matter? And I said, I can't get your loader started. It's the only thing here that we don't have running. Well, he said, I left a note in the cab on how to start it because he said, it's odd. And I said, well, I'm sitting in here now. I don't see a note. Well, he said, I put it right on the starter. And I said, the starter? Yeah, he said, there's a lever. And I looked on the floor, and there on the floor was a note. And it said, turn on the key, grab the handle next to the seat, and turn it to the left. That's the starter. It was a lever, and you had to turn it to the left, and that engaged the starter. We had never boosted it. We had never touched it. We moved snow around it for days. We never did anything with it. But after 3 days of not having any luck getting it going, we finally found the note on the floor and talked to the guy. I turned the handle and it fired right up. These guys all came up like I had worked some kind of magic and said, how in the hell did you get that thing going? I said, I read the note.
Yep.
You know, but even at the summer sales, we've ran into some issues. I remember being out there in July one year and watched the clouds come in, and at 6 o'clock, the yard lights came on at the Alerus parking lot, and then it ended up downpouring, and there was a swather sitting in the middle right over a drain, and you couldn't even see the tires on it.
Oh, that's right.
It's about 3.5 feet of water right over the drain there for a little while.
Yeah, and I can't get into all the eccentricities with the drain, but once upon a time we had to fight a party that thought that, you know, the drains were not serving their purpose on the parking lot, so we had to plug them. Well, when we did that, we got a whole bunch of snow and rain, and it flooded the whole place. You remember? I don't know if you were around for that. I know John and Shane will remember that one if I talk about it. But you know, Josh is right. Pretty soon the whole lot's full of water, or, you know, this is going on or that's going on, or a big wind will come up and push something across the lot into something else like a phantom. But we've seen a lot of things gone on, and a lot of things that go into all this. But I think that a lot of people learn when we're done working with them that they take a lot for granted prior to coming to an auction or while they're at an auction if they haven't had one.
No, and I think a lot of people got to keep in mind too that there's a lot of items that people have that are been stowed away in their buildings for many years, and if they're executed correctly and placed correctly and cleaned up, A lot of value in that stuff yet too, especially on the online portion.
You know, it's never ceased to amaze me when we go to places. We had a really interesting auction. Josh was out there, I believe, and did some washing by New Rockford one time.
Yep.
And I think that was before you started. But the gentleman and his wife were farmers and ranchers out by the coal mine, and the coal mine bought their farm and gave them money to relocate. And when they did so, they bought a farm by New Rockford. Very nice couple, hard workers, cattle people. And they built new buildings on this yard, and they brought everything with them from where they came from to there. And some of it never got unpacked. Some of it never got used again. And in that lineup, we had 6-foot pony press drills and bobsleighs and just things like that that hadn't seen daylight for 30 years. And, you know, a lot of people would drive in the yard and say, wow, who's going to buy that kind of stuff? You know, and I mean, the people came far and wide and bought that stuff because it was all like new. It had been undercover for 30 years. You know, we all watch these shows. We watch the car rescue and the Pawn Stars and all these things. I mean, there's hidden gems in every one of these buildings up and down this freeway and still throughout all these countrysides. It's getting to be a lot less. A lot of that stuff's disappearing, but almost every farmyard still has one hidden gem, I would say, wouldn't you?
I totally agree with that.
Well, we just had a sale last year with a bunch of hidden gems. I mean, the guy had a bunch of late model equipment with little to no hours that was found in sheds.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a tractor with 14 hours. Was driven in there and parked, passed away, sold it. Yeah, very, very interesting business. And I mean, they're back to that. You know, there's no two tractors alike. There's no two auctions alike. It's a business of unique, and every situation has to be handled that way. You know, it's easy to say, well, you know, we did Don's auction. That's how we did it. Well, now we're going to do George's auction. It's going to be different because there's always idiosyncrasies in there and things that need to be handled differently. But what a business. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's always changing, always new, always a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun.
You know, I think we all could say that we've met a lot of great people doing this. I
Oh,
mean, you
man.
know, the auction company, and I mean, you guys taken me in. We're almost like family. I recall a lot of stories of traveling with Tom and Shane on the road and just the fun we had, you know, on a 9-day swing out to western North Dakota. You know,
Yeah.
coming back across the state at 2 a.m. trying to get over by Jamestown from Mohall.
You know, we always thought you'd probably be a confirmed bachelor, but then you ended up getting married and having a family, and we ended up doing an auction for your in-laws way down in South Dakota.
Yeah, that's right.
I know,
Yep.
bless her soul, that she's put up with me, huh?
Well, I
don't
think we
know.
could all say that.
Yeah.
I think that you know, it's a longevity business because it's long hours. You're putting long hours in at certain times of the year, and we've always said this, and I mean, we always believe this. It's a production. It's like making a movie. It's like having a play. I mean, you're going to have everything ready because whether it's online or whether it's live, the auction starts at X time on X day, and everything needs to be ready then. There's no coming back and saying, well, we got to do this, or it rained today, so we can't do this. You know, it's different in that regard. It's showtime, and you got to have everything ready when it's showtime. And so if we got to be there sometimes back in the day, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, all night long, whatever it took, we would just do it. And, you know, it's part and parcel of what goes into the deal. You can't stop halfway through.
Yeah. I think we're running a little low on time here, so cut to the next segment here. Just kind of touch on a few of the highlights this past month. July consignment auction, the Grand Forks area truck and equipment auction over at the Alerus Center. That was our largest consignment auction to date.
Yeah, lot-wise. Yeah.
Lot-wise,
Item-wise, yeah.
Yep.
Item-wise, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That was super awesome. That was my first experience setting up an auction. So that was quite the introduction into the auction world, you could say. But
Well, you can let us know then, Reed, because it was about 95 degrees when you were doing that. You can let us know in December whether you like 20 below better or 95 above.
Yeah.
I can't wait for him to experience March when you get a walk with knee-high boots on and this mud's almost coming over the top of them.
And one day it's 60 and the next day it's 10 below. So that's what you call the combination auction. Summer is hot, winter is cold. March, you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, that sale, this last sale, everybody was having so much fun as far as sellers bringing items in. They brought in 2 or 3 times more than what they had told us. So it kind of hit us, a little bit by surprise, but we made it work, and because you have to.
Oh, yeah.
And it turned out to be a pretty darn good sale.
Well, spring was difficult in terms of, the late spring and snowing, and a lot more people leave and go away in the winter, and they aren't around to bring us stuff in March or April, so they want to do it in the summer. So it's getting to be that on the consignment end of things, the summer event is one of the larger auctions for number of items that are coming in, but had some real big highlights in that auction. Had a nice 485 case tractor that brought 164,000, late model John Deere combine that we were really, really pleased with at $107,000. MacDon head that brought $85,000 or $87,000. Just really good numbers across the board, still testifying to the fact that good used equipment is holding its value.
Yeah, how about that Bobcat?
Bobcat, 78,000, am I right?
And change, yeah.
Yeah, so
Just a real nice piece.
just keep in mind, folks, if you've got good equipment to sell, there's buyers for it, and you can watch auctions, see what's going on. You can call the auctioneer and find out what things are worth. We'll always be able to do the best job we can of telling you that. But we've said this for years. We actually have some displays that we take to farm shows and whatnot that say your equipment is probably worth more than you think.
Yep.
I think one tip to give a seller too, on a large sale like that is if the sooner you can get your equipment in, the better. I mean, there's always people driving through that lot that are looking. So if your equipment's there earlier, it gives people a lot longer time, to inspect it and look it over, and I think that really helps the seller.
Even if it's not coming into our lot, if it's on the internet and in our listing, the longer it's posted there for them to see, the better chance they'll have of falling in love with it.
Well, the best part I like is a lot of times, even for me, I'm not even looking for the piece of equipment I'll end up looking at, because you get a chance to see it and you go, hey,
Yeah.
this is I can really use this on the farm.
But it also, if they get it there a little earlier, it also gives us a chance, if it needs just a little bit of, minor washing or something, it just gives us time to do it and doll it up a little bit and, get a lot more eyes on it.
Yep, first impressions are everything.
And to that note, we used to be able to react a lot quicker. If a tractor or a combine needed decals, we could usually get them overnight. That's not the case anymore now. We all know that. Everybody's learned what's happened the last few years in the supply chains and things like that. So the longer we have to get some of those things done, the more better job we can do at getting it done for you.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Otherwise, we had a charity auction for 4-H. That was actually a live auction, which is something we haven't done for a little bit. But that went really well. I believe we raised just over 10,000, I believe. So that was really cool. There's another thing I experienced for the first time. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was good. Had a good time, had fun.
Yeah, had some nice local support from some area businesses that helped out with that. So thank you to them.
Also an interesting evening because a lot of our employees and coworkers and whatnot brought their children in, and they took part in the auction. And that was pretty neat too. It's nice to see the young ones getting started in the business that we've all built together.
Yeah, I think we'll be doing that again next year too. So something to look forward to again, and the customer appreciation part also too. So
yeah.
So
that was really cool. Big thank you to all of the businesses, people, and everybody that participated in that. That was a really cool opportunity for Resource Auction and myself. Otherwise, we had an auction over in the East End Colony over in Montana. I don't know if Dennis wants to touch on that a little bit.
Well, we've done a number of auctions in Montana over the years. We do have some other auctions coming up in Montana now. We've got another lineup of work coming up there. Sold a lot of late model equipment for that farm that replaced their combines. Got a good deal on some combines from a dealer. Dealer didn't want to take combines on trade. It's getting to be a lot of the deals that we're making with people. They're buying equipment straight out, whether they're buying it from a dealership or an auction, not trading, bringing their supposed trades to the auction. We sell them for them. They're doing better by doing that. The results to them end up being significantly better than what they would get if they were to trade. You can always do better selling your equipment to 1,000 people than you can to offer it to one. Just goes to stand to reason. There's a couple of things about auctions that, I think a lot of people take for granted. One is, if you expose your equipment to 1,000 people, your odds increase exponentially that you'll find a buyer or a group of buyers or many buyers, and you're working on uphill increments. If you have your tractor in the shed and you say, I want $17,000 for that tractor, I will guarantee you that's the most you're ever going to get. Nobody's ever going to say, well, I'll give you $17,500. They're not going to do it. They're going to say, I'll give you $15,000. Auctions, uphill increments, $16,500, $17,000, $17,500, $18,000. You like it better, sir? Sure, $19,000. Well, pretty soon, 17 was 19. And while it doesn't happen every time, it's pretty common because you're dealing with small increments. And those small increments are the ones that add up. When you tell a client, yeah, we think your auction's going to bring X, and all of a sudden you come to them afterwards and it's all said and done and it was $200,000 more, well, $250 here, $500 there, $750 there, on top of the $17,000 or whatever it is. It really truthfully all adds up, and that's all part and parcel of having that good auction.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We sell up. Everybody else sells down.
And there's nothing wrong in saying that because
Nope.
it's the truth. I
Yeah.
mean, it's it's the old adage of, well, I have it for sale. And there was a few years here that people were able to name their price, but I think maybe there's some things in the marketplace that are going to change that a little bit now.
Yeah.
But even at the best of days, if you have something for sale, someone's always going to offer you less.
Yep.
The likelihood of somebody walking in and offering you what you're asking is slim, and the possibility of them saying, I'll give you more, is almost inconsequential.
Yeah. Other than that, for upcoming auctions, we got
Yeah, we should maybe talk about the marjoram sale. Just touch on that a little bit, or did we talk about that in the last show?
I think we did. Had a real good auction.
Yeah.
Went very well. Yep. Nice equipment. Client for many years. Second time that, we did another partial auction for him in a partnership he was involved in before and had us come back and do an auction. So a repeat customer. We had good auctions all summer long. Market was good. Had a lot of interesting auctions. Again, this consignment, you touched on that, went quite well. I don't know. I think, you guys keep up the good work, and we'll keep putting the good word out there for the buyers and keep giving them a good product and keep giving our sellers all of the information we can give them to have good auctions. And
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're going out tomorrow to see a gentleman on his line of equipment he has, and it's that easy just to give us a call, and we'll set out and come out and take a look at what you got. And like Dennis said earlier, no two sales are the same. So and we adjust in how we do things, and we can take a look and do our homework a little bit and give you our advice in a few days to follow, and it's that simple.
right.
one thing I thought about when you asked about things to talk about and topics for this time, if we got time to touch on it, and it's probably one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give to a single seller out there that's contemplating an auction that hasn't made up their mind yet how they're going to do it or what they're going to do. Be very careful in the decisions that you make, because there are differences. Just like if you're going to the store and you're buying day-old donuts versus fresh donuts, or buying the name brand ketchup versus the discount ketchup, there is a difference in all that stuff. It's not all just packaged differently at the end of the day, and nothing to be taken away from people that are in this business, but Now, if you're not in the business of doing auctions online, be it live simulcast or online totally, having an auctioneer tell you that they have the internet or having an auctioneer tell you that they have online bidding is a very cautionary statement that I need to make to people that I know and care about out there that might have an auction, who might consider hiring another auctioneer because it's their neighbor or their friend or whatever. There's a tale of woe from an auction that happened in a county just west of where I live a few weeks ago. Should not have happened. Absolutely should not have taken place. And it was just as simple as the auctioneer telling the farmer, yep, we have the internet. Well, you might have online bidding, but if you don't have a following on your online bidding, you don't have online bidding. We have tens of thousands of registered bidders in our online bidding system. If you don't have a following in that, you don't have online bidding. You offer online bidding, but that doesn't mean that you have successful online bidding. Don't make that mistake, folks. And I mean, that's a crucial and huge thing. And it's your mistake to make, but at the end of the day, there's no reason to do it because we're here. We're only a phone call away. You make that phone call, we'll give you the best advice there is. And if someone tells you, yep, we have online bidding and they're not doing a lot of auctions, they aren't probably going to have a big following. And that means that they probably aren't going to bring you big dollars for your equipment.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There is a difference, and we just ask for the opportunity to let us present to you what we can do and offer for you.
It's your choice, but you only get one choice because you only get one chance at this. There's very few redos.
No, Dennis, you've said that for years, and I think it's really true.
We've booked a lot of auctions. We have an old radio ad, and it's still out there running. And one of the things it says is that you only get one chance at this, so make sure that you do it right. Would you trust your livelihood to someone that doesn't know the difference between IVT and ILS, or know the difference between fertilizer and micronutrients? Or would you like to entrust your livelihood to just spend your money to put jet fuel in someone's plane? And that's an old commercial that's been around for a long time, and every bit of it, part and parcel, is true. I mean, you have a chance to do this one time. You might as well do it and make it the best that you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Avoid future regret.
And I mean, I think that's our goal when we're setting up sales, you know. It's a one-time deal. It's a life-changing event for a lot of people, so we're there to make it the best it can be for that seller, you know.
Exactly.
I'll sum that all up and we can get closed up, Reed, because I can tell that you're getting ready to go. But, you know, that's one of the questions all three of us have been asked many times. Is that necessary? And what's the answer? Yes, yes, and yes.
Absolutely.
It's necessary.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'll just push we have our August online sale coming up and September. Mm-hmm. And they're the end of last week of each month. So keep us in mind if you got something that you'd like to sell, and we can help you out with that.
Very strong auction last August.
Yes, we had
one of our best auctions for the year.
Yep, it was. So it's not late. It's not anything like that. If you didn't get in on the July sale, August is great too.
Remember, guys are bidding on their phone.
Yep. Nothing better now than having a tractor drive you down the field, and you have all times of time to buy stuff.
Yeah, and if you got any questions or you would like to consign an item or even set up an auction with us, feel free to give us a call at the office. A couple of our contacts will be at the end of this podcast here on the screen. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, for coming in. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for all your hard work. And want to give one last round out to all the sales reps. Make sure you contact them in your area and get a hold of them. And as time goes on, we'll bring all them in here and you can meet them and whatnot. But we got a lot of people that are working hard out there to line things up and get ready for these auctions.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. This was a fun one. So
thank you, Reed.
Thank you, Reed. Thanks for putting this together.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course.